Okay, folks, welcome to this morning's Saturday morning show. We are going to be talking about October gardening. Now, you wouldn't think October is really the time to do some gardening, but you've probably noticed by now that most of your leaves from the trees are actually in your garden. And this is why this is what we're talking about, really. Now is really the time to plant and prepare and as well, plant for spring. Who
Yeah.
would have thought we're talking about spring already? What happened to Christmas?
Just skipped over that.
That's like so when it comes to having a blooming garden in this in spring, or should I say, when it comes to a blooming garden in the spring, October time is really the time to prepare. Most gardeners will know that anyway. Um, by laying the groundwork now, your plants will have time to settle in and actually put roots down over the autumn period and the winter. So they're ready for that big push skywards once the coldest months are actually gone. This is actually like building a business, isn't
Mhm.
it? When you think about the logic of it, and whatever you want to do in 6 months' time for anything that you do in your life, this is wealth creation stuff when you think about it. But it is like that for the plants. Whatever you want to do, you have to do it now to get in 6 months' time. It's the
It's,
same with selling your house, isn't it?
I was just going to say, it's just like what we spoke about the other week about selling your house. You want to sell in the spring, you have to get everything in place now and start that groundwork and get everything moving so that you could actually have a sale and move in the springtime and everything
It's
comes
a,
to
it's a nat
fruition.
it's a natural cycle. It's
Yeah.
built into our psyche when you think about the logic of that, because it applies to everything. You know,
Hmm.
you don't just start something all of a sudden, boom, it's sprung up. It's the same with the farmer, isn't it? The farmer
Yeah.
plants the seed now, sows the seed, nurtures the seed, and does everything else for the harvest later on. You know, and it just doesn't happen straight away. So it's like anything else. It's like same with the garden as well. And October is the time to start preparing and just getting things tidied up as well. So even if you've never really gardened before, I have gardened before. I could claim that, but I've got to say I don't know about you, Richard, but I am not the world's most proficient gardener.
I wouldn't say I am either, but obviously I do work in the garden when
You're
I need to.
probably doing a lot more than me.
Probably, yeah.
I usually just say, "Can we not just get someone else to do it?" To which I get looks of disgust from Elaine. It's like, "What?" And I'm like, "Well, it's like I've worked all my life to build wealth, so I don't need to do that anymore. I don't want to do it. I would rather be lying on a beach somewhere." Oh dear. There was a day where I detested the fact of lying on a beach, believe it or not. But now all of a sudden it becomes really appealing, especially at times like this when it's Baltic.
Yeah, it's cold
Um,
outside, yeah.
And I've got the heating on. I just made sure I've prepared it and got it on because it's like, oh yeah, boy, if the heating turns off halfway through this, it's going to be cold. So even if you've never really gardened before, as I said, it can be surprisingly easily. And I'll be honest, when I have, it's enjoyable and it's enriching and enriching with a few expert tips. But I think for me personally, the greatest thing I got out of gardening was thinking time and
Hmm.
almost like a meditation,
Yeah.
if that makes
A lot
sense.
of people
It's
do.
like
A lot of people do use it for that reason, and you see a lot of people who enjoy gardening and they use it as a means of, kind of switching off and
mhm.
kind of like their own time, downtime.
Yeah, it's yeah, very for me, very therapeutic. I mean, it's a sense of achievement as well when you walk out the garden and you actually see what you've done.
Hmm.
I think that's quite rewarding. So we're going to be talking about our five main subject headings. So we're going to be talking about the tidy up and the trim, what to do,
Hmm. Yeah.
getting a fast floral fix. That's quite important. Bed your bulbs as well. Woo the winter wildlife. That's a really important. God, we've got some amount of squirrels. We just fill that monkey nuts tray up every single day, and they just go and hide everything in the garden. I could probably dig up my garden, and every single spade I dig up could have monkey nuts in it, been buried by the squirrels.
See, there is squirrels round by mine, but I don't get any in my garden. But obviously, you're right next to the glen, so you've got a lot.
Oh, Chip and Dale's never away for the damn thing. It's like we've got names for them: Chip and Dale, and Prickles the Hedgehog, and Steven Seagal is off. We went on holiday, and the boys must have forgotten to feed him because they were at work, and he's disappeared. He's like, "Nah, I've had enough. I'm going somewhere else."
I'm not getting any.
Steven Seagal has obviously read the book "Who Moved My Cheese." In other words, I'm not hanging about to starve to death to wait for somebody to come back and feed me. I'm going to find somewhere else, some other utopian place that someone else is going to feed me all the time. I didn't think he's going to get a better gig than what we had for him. I'm kind of wishing he would come back, to be honest, but hey-ho. And prime your pots to pop. That's a really good one as well. But I mean, breaking down these jobs into manageable and pleasurable chunks creates little rewards at every stage, really, for a blooming spring garden to enjoy yourself or captivate buyers as well.
Yeah.
So excuse the pun. Let's dig in.
Yeah, definitely. You're absolutely right, though, and it's like we say, and this will tie in nicely because as we speak about putting your property on the market now to get a sale in spring, then you should also be looking at things like your October gardening as well, because throughout that time, you want your property to be looking its best and tidy, and then even have that come to fruition in spring when you're handing over the keys, and the buyers are so happy that they've got that property with this beautiful garden that's now coming into bloom because you've prepped it at this time of year in preparation for that.
It is, isn't it? It's yeah. I think you've nailed it when you said that. It is actually the preparatory work you do just now to enjoy the garden when it gets to spring, and then all of a sudden it just like wow. Whereas if you don't do the preparatory work when you get to spring, it's like, oh my goodness, I've got to cut back all the overgrowth and get rid of all the leaves before anything happens, and then you end up getting a late spring garden rather than on time.
And plus, you'll be left trying to tidy up your garden before you hand it over for a new sale as well.
Well, talk to me about tidying then. Tidying up the garden and trimming and all the rest of it. What should we be doing?
Yeah, one of the most satisfying things about gardening jobs and that is getting that cut back and the spent summer plants that have passed their best, and give that opportunity to let other plants in the garden shine that do kind of thrive at this latter part of the year. You've got evergreens and seed heads, and they will all make some beautiful show through like the winter and colder months as your garden kind of slumbers down for this time of year. So yeah, I said about evergreens. I mean, trim them back, the evergreens, the bushes, the shrubs, and maybe even make them into some nice tidy shapes. And what's that called? Is it topiary? Is it topiary?
I have no idea, but I think we know the point. Like you make a dog or a cat or a hen or a duck or something like that, or whatever it is.
Yeah, but you could prune all these evergreen bushes and shrubs and things, and really bring some structure and things into your garden and make it quite inviting. It is topiary, but anyway, didn't get too technical.
No, like the boy in Dalgety Bay, which chucked all his rubbish in the front garden and called it a work of art.
Really, I must have missed that.
Honestly, and the authorities are actually saying we'll have to think about this then, because it's like he's maybe got a point. It's like, come on, it's just junk in the front garden. Anyway, let's move on.
Yeah, but what you need to be careful about as well is, I think, make sure you leave those architectural dried leaves and the seed heads, such as like teasels and poppies and things as well, because they will seed at this time of year. So if you pull them out, then obviously you need to allow them to seed. And those ornamental grasses and things that kind of grace the garden and make it beautiful around this time of year, they look really magical when it was like that the other morning actually, when the frost come in and I was out walking the dog early in the morning. It was like -2. Quite surprised it dropped that low, but you could see on the grass how it all sits with the frost and things in the morning. It's quite nice. So yeah, so be careful. Obviously leave some of these things like poppy seed heads and things in place, because these are still dispersion seeds and things for the spring. So if you pull them out too early, but yeah, rake up the leaves and things that cause if they all build up on your pathways, and even think about your gutters and things as well. You could even create a compost pile and get them all on there, and even use that then to fertilize for your planting for the spring as well. or bag them up and they can be collected. You know, the local council here in Fife anyway do the pickups and things, but you need to obviously book them online. Or look for local gardeners or allotments. Silverburn's got the allotments up there. If people, you'll always be looking for possibly some compost and things, if you want to speak to them or somebody close by to you, and they will get the use of it. It's all worthwhile for them, especially as gardeners and things as well. But all the goodness will make that fantastic spring compost. So don't waste it.
I mean, we more or less put everything back in the glen because that's where it comes from in the first place.
Yeah.
It's all the trees that are alongside there that end up blowing into your garden, and they're okay with that. But you're right; it breaks down, and all that natural goodness actually just goes straight back into the earth again and replenishes the whole thing. The nitrogen levels and stuff like that over time. So I definitely think that's probably the way to go. But tidying the garden is probably essential, especially if you're on the market right now or you're just about to go on the market, because people really want to see something that's clean and tidy. I mean, you've got it. We make so much effort in our house, Richard, and yet when you walk out the door to the garden, it's like a tip for some houses. It's like, but why would you not make any effort for that? Oh well, it's too cold. It's like, but it's still a usable space, and you really should be defining it like that.
Yeah, you could treat it like a cut and blow dry. Do you know? It's like the simple things that just tidy up and make sure your garden looks that kind of groomed, and kind of that groomed and gorgeous grove. And even though while it's kind of sleeping at this time of year, it's still tidy, and you've put all these things in place for it to be able to spring up in spring.
It does really because it's not that active when it comes into the late autumn and especially in winter when it goes cold. Nothing really grows from then on except things like holly and stuff like that. That are quite robust plants and trees. But you're right. It's again we're coming back to the preparatory work. And also when someone walks out at this time of year into your garden, it just looks nice and tidy. It's just a complete reflection of what somebody would expect. I mean, as well, could you imagine if I left all the leaves in my garden from the trees and just left them there and thought, well, that's going to be fine. It's going to go back into the goodness of the ground, and that's all very well. But if I'm on the market and somebody comes round to view that, first thing they're going to say is, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to clean all that up all the time. So it kind of puts them off. You're almost putting a negative connotation on it, on the fact that your garden is wonderful, but by the way, you've got to do a lot of work.
Yeah, because a lot of people
nobody wants to hear about all the effort and the work that they have to do. Everybody just wants to see the results. They don't want to know the journey it's taken. They just want the results. So just show them the results if you're selling. That's it. Show them what they can have. Don't show them what they need to do.
Yeah, because everybody wants, I mean, especially like family units and things, they'll want the big garden. But if the first thing that's hitting them is the upkeep, and that's the first thing in their mindset, it's going to put them off.
Yeah. Oh, floral fixes and stuff like that as well. I mean, you don't really need to wait for spring, as I said before, and touched on some of the plants that you could put in to have that sort of blooming garden. If you want some instant gratification for your pots and your window boxes or your borders, winter bedding plants are definitely your friend at this point in time. I mean, these delightful flowers serve up a gorgeous burst of colour throughout the winter months. And you buy them when they're very little and they're just about to bloom. So make sure you do that. Buy them. It's the old thing about it's the Lidl's with the veg, isn't it? Buy it just before before it's about to go ripe, and then by the time you get it home and you're ready to use it at that point in time, and it's got a longer shelf life, if that makes sense. So there is a lot of plants that can give you that, and your local garden centre or the rest of it be able to tell you. Your local gardener, next door neighbours and stuff like that, have all these different things. And your sometimes your plant sales and stuff. I mean, they're few and far between when it comes to this time of year, but there is places that actually still do it.
Even a lot of like your local Lidl and Aldi's and Home Bargains and things, they all have like your wee plants out the front, and they're seasonal as well. So.
Oh, pansies and delicate violas are soft and velvety favourites, definitely. You know, literally just a sort of a picture postcard, winter of joy, and flowers that flowers throughout the winter and
Mhm.
into spring. Um, Now we all know when spring's coming because you know yourself the snowdrops start to appear.
Snowdrops.
So they're not going to appear anytime soon, but you can stick some bulbs in the ground now actually
Mhm.
for that preparatory moment when it
Yeah.
starts to appear, and then that'll tell you when spring's on the go.
Yeah.
Generally
Snowdrops,
though, it
bluebells.
but they usually come up early and then it snows.
I know it does. The snowdrops are
You ever
first,
noticed
and
that?
sometimes we'll get a cold spell, and then you get the bluebells, and then
Aye.
sometimes for me it's like, right, okay, bluebells, it's springtime.
You go, hey, spring's in the way. The snowdrops are up, and then it chucks it in the snow.
Yeah.
It's like, well, it's maybe not on the way then. But you're right. Probably the bluebells are the ones to watch out for. So plant some bluebells now if you can. And these are all different things that you could use to add. The colours just to give your garden is clearly the thing that's going to pop just now in your garden is probably going to be the grass. It's going to be noticed the most, and the winter greens on the things like hollies and stuff like that, and the berries. As a result, it comes out of that. These are
Mhm.
the things that you're going to see in gardens right now. Maybe the odd robin. So you might want to attract robins if you've got cats. Obviously, you maybe don't want to. That's obviously food for them. Um, but you've got robins if potentially in your garden, and it just adds to a wee bit of flavour, especially if somebody comes round and they go out the back garden to view your property, and they're out the back garden, and all of a sudden it's complete silence, and then all you hear is the birds chirping, and you maybe hear a wee brook or a stream in the background, and that's all you really hear.
Mhm.
And I think for me, that then reinforces the relaxed atmosphere that you portray for your property, and the
Mhm.
fact that you'll not get any grief, you'll not get any noise disruption, or anything that's going to put you off. So it's easy to paint that picture that you could be sitting out the back garden and having a cup of coffee, or have the patio heater on, and you could have a glass of wine or a glass of whiskey or something like that, and
I had
cozy
I had mine
cozy
on
up
on
in a
Saturday.
blanket with friends,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. If you can paint that picture, you're on a winner straight away. If that could
Mhm.
definitely do that. Here's other things to think about in terms of plants: uh, primroses, primulas,
Yeah.
and actually cowslips. Yeah, are
Mhm.
another group of quintessential early spring blooms.
Mhm.
Now, I, what I would say is plant them among bulbs, or in with maybe pansies and violas, for a softer and more natural look
Yeah.
to what you're doing. Richard, is this something that you do with your garden? I mean, I don't do that
No,
much.
not so much in my own garden. My mum's quite good with her plants and things like that. And the natural look as opposed to the regimented, like, and a lot of people plant things in lines, and which is nice. But I would prefer the more natural look where they're mixed together and come up at different times. So that is definitely the way to do it. I think really when you look at it as a bonus, winter bedding is also a great way to kind of plump up your display and plug in those kind of gaps in between,
Hmm.
with like their green leaves and their pretty flowers and things, to fill out your borders and things. And they mix well with the bulbs, as that kind of underlayer, and it kind of gives that sophisticated take on your edges and borders because you've got it set up for them to come up in different times, and they layer and look quite natural as opposed to that regimented being planted that way.
Okay.
So there is an art to it,
No,
but you can do it.
normally in the past, I mean, when I've thought about my mum and dad's house, normally in the past, I think it's just a case that they've planted the bulbs, tulips and stuff like that at some point in time,
Mhm.
and they've always stayed under the earth after
Yeah,
that, and then they just,
yeah.
you know what they're like, they just naturally just spring up when they want to, and so
Mhm.
so I don't think they've actually particularly planned to plant them at this time of year. I think they've just planted them at some time of year, and then they do their own job.
And
They
then they
get
fall into
themselves into
the
a
then
natural
they fall
cycle.
into they fall into that the cycle of the seasons, yeah. And then it creates
Um,
that natural look.
So how easy is it to do this then?
So when you think about like bulbs and corms are like crocuses and things.
Okay.
Growing bulbs, and obviously like their sturdier cousins, the chromes and things, is surprisingly quite easy to pick the right ones, plant them now, and then enjoy the reward of pollen and the scent and the look of them and the colour of them, and desire throughout into the spring. So bulbs and corms should be planted in a hole at the depth of roughly 3 times their size. So when you're doing bulbs, and my gran actually taught me this. So when you put a bulb in, yeah, and it goes in, and it's to be down 3 times as deep as the bulb, and that's just rough. I mean, it tells you on the instructions, but if you want to know, that's roughly how you put it into the ground. And you could
It's
use
actually quite surprising they actually live. You know, they're able to live, because you kind of think to yourself, it's quite cold weather, so you would think naturally that they would die. But then when you think about ground source heat pumps and the fact that they go down into the ground and
and
they
take
can
that,
actually provide
yeah,
the heating, then you think to yourself, then, well, it must be the case that down in the earth is actually quite warm in comparison to what we have on the surface. This actually goes in line with when you look at the insects and that you have on the big mountains like Everest and stuff, and you see some even some of the wee mice, and they stay under about an inch from the surface, and that's where it's always warm. And when you get above inch, it's Baltic.
yeah,
So they can't actually, they would freeze. But because there's just a slight tiny gap. It's almost like smoke in a room. If you lie down, if you go down the ground, you'll have a gap
yeah.
between the floor and between the smoke itself, because it's dense. It's less dense, so it rises. And it's probably just a bit like that, I suppose. So when you're down in the earth, that's probably why it is quite warm.
Yeah, and they're just that 1 inch or whatever you say, and it's the difference to the temperature and a couple of degrees or whatever between
Hmm.
life and death really for them. But yeah, it is amazing how under the ground actually retains the heat as opposed to just above the surface.
Hmm.
And that's what bulbs and things are all about. And when I was saying about that perfect depth to build them, you could actually buy the proper planting tools and the wee thin trowels to do that, that bring you down into the right depth for
I'd be
planting.
interested to hear anybody else. You know, if anybody else is tuning in just now or watching the rerun on this, whether they, what's their thoughts on, planting bulbs now?
Yeah.
What do they do it? What type of bulbs do they plant? And do they have a certain arrangement, or do they cut back their garden, or what's their thoughts on what they do, uh, as opposed to what we are saying here?
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be a lot more green fingered people watching this than what we are. So yeah, please jump in the comments and
None,
and
zero.
interject with any tips and things that you've got, because obviously now is the time of year and a lot of people will be probably thinking about that
So,
are garden
so what
minded.
other things do we have to think about to for
I think
this?
when you really want to have that sprightingly like early spring display, do you know, if you want it to hit
Hmm.
spring and you want to have that display, do you know, mix things like even like scented daffodils and crocuses and things like I said as well, and have them scattered over the soil and plant them where just where they fall for that, like I say, that naturalistic kind of placement. But if you have them all mixed properly and ready now, they'll all jump up right as soon as it's springtime. Do you know, like that's like that
To be
snowdrop.
honest, I think it's just a case of just scattering them about, like you've said. For me personally, I'm not really sure if I would be able to, unless you've got some sort of skill and expertise in it, and you've tried it several times to get it the right floral arrangement.
Mhm.
I think it's it. But you notice how daffodils and crocuses tend to be the go-to for everything.
Yeah,
They're
they're
they're,
quite
they're,
hardy
prob-
and
they're probably so popular, eh?
yeah, I think they're quite hardy ones as well, and they've got nice colours and they kind of complement each other, um, as well. But I think also when you think about like not only just getting that spring burst of colour, you want to keep your garden blooming throughout the summer as well, like April through to like June. Do you know, that springtime and then beyond as well? So do you know, add that
Mhm.
there's different selections and things as well of different bulbs that will come up at different times. You get alum bulbs together with ranunculuses and an anemone. Plants have got really weird names, but people that know plants will know what I'm talking about. And different types of these corms, like I say, like crocuses and things as well. These will all come up at different times and all have brilliant colours, and they'll keep your garden looking naturally colourful throughout the spring and into the summer.
And this is where I talked about the keeping the roots from rotting and dropping a small handful of gravel into each planting hole before laying the bulb or the corm, then replacing the soil for the perfect ritual of hope and renewal. You know, it's probably just the reason for that is because it gives it proper drainage to the roots. Because if you have it entrenched in that and then the ground freezes, more than likely the root's going to rot. Whereas if you have a good amount of drainage and drainage and would I say aeration to a degree? So it just allows it to dry out a bit better, and it's not as suffocating for the root itself. That's probably why the roots actually survive quite well.
Yeah. What about, obviously, I mean, you touched on it already, and obviously you've got quite a lot in your garden, the winter wildlife.
Oh, geez. I don't know what it is, but I feel an obligation to feed the nations of
Animals.
wildlife. Oh, dearie me. It's the squirrels, it's even the pigeons. You get the odd seagull, as I said, like Stephen when he arrived. It's especially the hedgehogs at this time of year. So a lot, you know, they go into hibernation sometimes, but some of them are out, and sometimes now and again they just get caught off guard because they're still going. And this is the time where hedgehogs actually suffer. Squirrels as well, if they've not built their stores, or the ground's too hard, they can't get into it. That could be a major issue for a squirrel as well. So you've got to watch out for that. There's obviously birds. There's birds as well, but you have to put seed in a place where the cats can't get them, obviously, because that's the one thing. Funny enough, you would think that cats, I mean, you know, my cats are so used to it. They'll often just sit with the squirrels.
Just watch them,
Yeah, and sometimes they'll chase the squirrels. And you know, Jess was out the other day, and the squirrel jumped over her, and Jen then jumped under her when she jumped up, and then they both ran, and then they both ran away, and then she just stopped when she got to the pond bit. She just stopped and just watched it run around, and that was it. So it was more of a playful thing rather than actually an attacking thing.
Like a predatory thing,
Yeah, it wasn't. I wouldn't say it's predatory at all with the squirrels. The same with they're no bad with the birds as well. Now they don't really bother that much. But then if they're fed properly and they don't really need to, then they're very, very domesticated. So why would they need to? I know it's in their nature now and again to do it, but if you, I would say it's like Sun City. I think it's the 13th green on the golf course in Africa, in South Africa, at Sun City. They deliberately overfeed the crocodiles or the alligators, depending on which one it is, on the 13th green, because they actually come onto the green, but they overfeed them and they'll never ever attack anybody. They just go back into the water. They just run away.
Yeah.
Because they're not hungry. So there's no natural instinct for them to be predatory towards anything. So they just overfeed them, and I think that's the same.
Otherwise, they're losing golfers.
Yeah, I know. I think it's the same thing with your pets. If your pets are happy and they're content, it's very rare they'll probably actually go out and hunt. I know it's a natural instinct to them, but I think over time, cats have actually begun to lose that. I mean, dogs used to hunt as well. You know, dogs years and years ago were natural predators as well, but they've become so domesticated and so docile for dogs.
Or spoiled.
Yeah, you see that. Well, you see it as well, don't you?
Yeah.
So anyway, yes, I have a lot of wildlife coming into the garden. So while you're preparing your garden for the winter and spring, my suggestion would be don't forget your feathered friends and other wild creatures who may have their home there over the summer, and you've seen them. So you've enjoyed them all the great times, and you've got young children that have sat and watched the squirrels run about the garden and stuff like that. Maybe it's time to give some of that back now and help them out. So hang some squirrel proof, because you need to, if you're trying to feed the birds, and you've got squirrels, you need to have squirrel-proof feeders. I mean, it's difficult to get them because squirrels are very, very ingenious, if that makes sense, to being able to work out exactly what to do in a certain situation to get the food. So make sure you've got squirrel-proof feeders if you can to help your garden birds throughout the coldest months when food is actually quite scarce. Probably my recommendation would be use RSPB, the Royal Society Prevention Protection of Birds, recommended mixes to help them stay healthy, because there's a lot of false information out here what you should be feeding. I mean, you can feed. Here's a classic example. You can feed a hedgehog cat food, but it can't have fish in it.
Ah, didn't know
Yeah,
that.
so it can have chicken, it can have liver, it can have beef, and all the rest of it, but it can't have fish in it.
Right.
You don't give it cat food with fish in it. So that's the one thing you don't do for a hedgehog. But you can give it normal dry cat food.
And the
Well, you
one
can
thing
give it wet cat.
everyone,
You can give it wet cat food as well, but you don't give it fish.
and everybody always seems to think that you give hedgehogs milk and water, and that's milk and bread, sorry, and that's
No, nothing like that at all. That'll not be good for them at all. That's the same with things like ducks and birds. Bread is not a natural thing for a bird at all. You shouldn't really give that to a bird. It should be natural bird seed that you will get. So that's the most important thing for them. And you can get that anywhere, to be honest. You can get it at Home Bargains. Home Bargains sell a lot of it. Home Bargains was think we would get our monkey nuts for the squirrels. So and we actually take the monkey nuts and actually feed the squirrels up in Silverburn as well. And round about. So it's like we should just open a van, squirrel food, and drive up and sell it to the people at Silverburn. I don't understand why the cafe doesn't do that. The window cafe. I think they're missing a trick in the fact that people would buy bird food and squirrel food. Purposely just to feed the squirrels in the secret garden, in the garden itself, overall in the forest. I think my other suggestion for this would be make a pile of dry sticks and stalks for overwintering insects to hole up in. It keeps them all nice and cozy and everything like that. And you can buy stylish bug hotels and bee bricks to help your pollinator stay safe and warm and dry.
Yeah, you see a lot of them in the garden shops and things. These wee bug hotels and things.
Again, you could even get an old desiccated tree. The big tree trunks that you get. There's loads of insect life in there. I mean, that's basically the bug hotel we're talking about. So if you've got somebody that's just chopped in a big massive tree, or if you've chopped in a big tree and has got a big tree trunk, just roll it up into the corner of the garden and leave it there over the winter period, and it'll be a wee haven for them, so to speak. I think it's important as well. Obviously, we've touched on bees. I mean, we know how important bees are to everything.
Yeah.
If you didn't have bees, you wouldn't have any fruit.
The whole ecosystem collapses.
Yeah, you wouldn't have any plants or anything like that. Nothing would be able to replicate itself. Nothing would be able to bloom again. There would be no fruits either, because the bees naturally pollinate the plants back and forward, and actually that's what creates the fruit. So bees are absolutely essential to our ecosystem in terms of how we work. So you need to make sure you do things like that as well. If you can, remember, if you can, there's ways to do this for free. You could probably go on YouTube and you'll get loads and loads of advice on how to use something. Maybe it's even in the house that you're about to throw out, that could actually be a perfect haven for insects, for bees, for birds, for hedgehogs, for anything, any animal like that, any bit of wildlife. It's important to remember, though, the wildlife is few and far between. When you look at our ecosystem, out of the living species on this planet, just over 30% is humans. But over 60% is actually the animals that are kept to feed the humans. So they're no wildlife either. So 96% of the living beings on this planet, 96% is actually us and the animals to feed us. There's only 4% of the living creatures on this planet that are actually truly wildlife.
That's funny. That's a crazy stat to think about.
That's that's hard to comprehend,
Mhm.
genuinely. But it's just 4% of creatures on this planet are actually truly wildlife.
In the wild,
So
yeah.
when you think about the small proportion in comparison to what we are and what the cattle is to feed us, then you kind of think to yourself, no wonder there's people out there that are keeping going on about you're having to protect this. You have to protect this wildlife because
Mhm.
you could see how easily the 96% could probably end up through no fault of their own doing something. It could end up wiping out some of the 4% for
Yeah.
no reason at all. Purely for the fact that it could be, well, we're going through it now, isn't it? Pesticides,
Mhm.
herbicides, all these different things that we're using are actually affecting bees and stuff like that as well. So these are all things to be mindful of. Make sure you can use stuff that's organic, possibly, and its natural environment as much as possible. But again, YouTube's a great source for that.
Yeah.
If you're lucky enough to have a hedgehog in your garden, they'll need warm leaf piles. So
Yeah.
to hibernate in. So if you do have a leaf pile and it's in the corner of the garden and you're about to clear it up, just be careful because you might actually have hedgehogs in there hibernating.
Mhm.
And if you wake a hedgehog up, it could basically kill it. Now we have wee huts under our hedgerows.
Yeah.
We do, we bought them, and you just put them under there, and some of them will be used by hedgehogs. They'll just go in there, they'll hibernate, and then that'll be them till the springtime. There
Mhm.
is great local hedgehog hospitals. There's one up Newborough in Fife.
Yeah, that's right.
There's a local person that actually runs a hedgehog hospital up there, and they always go on at this time of year on all the social media pages to advise people what they need to do, and also if you've got younger hedgehogs to bring them to them, and they'll look
Mhm.
after them through the season and then return them back once
Yeah.
the colder season is over. So please remember though, if you've got leaves and everything like that, just don't set light to them
Mhm. Yeah.
because you
No,
don't know
no,
what's going to be in them.
yeah, but you hear a lot of things about people setting fires in the garden or what they've got left, and unfortunately, some hedgehogs are in there hibernating.
It's the whole thing about the combine harvesters, isn't it?
Yeah.
They go around the combine harvesters and stuff like that, and animals will get killed as a result of that. Insects will be affected as a result of that. But ideally, on a smaller scale, if you can check, then
Yeah.
please check. Don't just set a light to a pile of leaves. Probably just my advice is move them from one place to another before you actually decide to do that. But they're probably better just if you can sift them off to the side of the garden, or you can stick them back over where they've come from. If it's been a glen next door or you've got a
Mhm.
field next door, you can put them into there, and that'll be even better. So,
Yeah.
my advice then, and finishing off on here before we come on to our next topic, Richard, and you can cover that, is
Yeah.
gardens are ever more important in the battle against extinctions, and looking after the animals isn't only good for biodiversity; it's also a source of joy as you watch the wildlife flourish from your window.
Yeah.
You've seen me; I'm putting up loads of photographs of the
Yeah.
squirrels and stuff like that, helping themselves, caught red-handed.
Yeah.
Aldi's fruit and nut mix.
Do you know we're labelled as a nation of animal lovers and pet lovers and things as well. So I know that obviously a lot of people do take a lot of enjoyment looking after wildlife and things, but it's how to do it properly. And that was some good tips there on how to do that in your own garden.
This comes to our last subject then. What we want to talk about is the pots. Um, you know,
Pot. Yeah.
what do we do that? Pots for the front door, pots for the back garden.
Do you know
What
pots are really
should we how
important?
we should we
And
use them?
yeah, they are quite important, and I think they really deserve kind of a section all to themselves because they do really elevate anywhere that can safely anywhere that can be safely put, and that's anywhere from the edges of your garden, your balconies, your terraces, your decking, do you know, just sat at your front door, window boxes, and up the sides of your paths and things as well. Always think as
Hmm.
well, if you're doing it at like your back doors and or like the power of three, always have three of them. It just seems to work. The three pots, and you usually get one big one, a middle-sized one, and a small one. But yes, when you see pots stuffed with different varieties of maybe like tulips, will give you flowers maybe from the end of March through to maybe May. and they'll kind of dazzle before they bloom with their fresh green foliage as well, which is always quite nice on its own, even without the flower. So really think about what you're putting in these pots and what time of year. Do you know you can make really charming window boxes with these daffodils, the small ones. I think they're T to T, they're called, or something. I don't know. Daffodils, they're really nice to sit on window boxes. Crocuses and things as well. Primroses. You said about cowslips earlier as well, Jim. They're really nice for a kind of cheery welcoming to someone's home or anybody's home. And a lovely view when you're looking out a window and you've got a window box and it's got really nice plants in it that are seasonal, and you're all cozy indoors looking out. And if you've got viewers coming and you've got nice window boxes and a picture window, do you know when it's cozy inside and it's cold outside, but you've still got those nice flowers, that'll create a really good feeling with the viewer and make them picture themselves there. So yeah, think about that as well. For a pot of maybe blooms that flowers are maybe different times a year, that they bloom at different times, try maybe you get lasagna planting, it's called. So it's like you layer it with bulbs by layering the biggest ones at the bottom, and then you bring in the smallest ones at the top. And then what happens is they bloom and come through at different times. So there's always something going on in these pots or window boxes, and that's quite low maintenance as well, because you've already done all that work and you've layered these bulbs to come up at different times. And that lasts for months without obviously you having to keep on repotting or changing what you're doing. And once they're done and you cut them back, they'll do the same the next year again because you've already planted them. So it's a reoccurring thing as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, I mean, you could even say pots are kind of your secret weapon. To have that really stunning garden. Do you know they're easily moved around? You can replant them for different seasons if you like. And you get well, if you've been in B&Q or any local like garden section of shops and things, you get a lot of stylish designs and pots and window boxes and things that could look really trendy or look really traditional. It just depends. And you could then customize what you put in it by this lasagna layering of bulbs and whatever to really control the burst of colour, or the blooms, or like that kind of really botanical beauty, if it's even just the greens that come through within your pot. And you could make a lot of impact with a pot or a window planter, in my opinion. But I'm sure
you're going to pick it. So we're more or less at the end of this. So if you're going to pick out one thing that you give anybody advice to do about what we've just spoken so far, what would that be?
For me, it's probably making the place tidy, and this time of year is clear out your garden, cut all the old dead plants and things that have passed their best for this time of year. Even if you're going to do anything, at least have it nice and tidy. So you've got that. Do you know if you've got viewers and things come in, you've not got big piles of leaves, you've not got loads of dead plants and do you know dead weeds that have obviously maybe grown and then died. If anything, at least have it clean and tidy and cut back for this time of year, so that there's not that kind of, oh God, look at the state of this garden, I'm going to have to clean it all up and tidy it all, if anything. And then if you're really green fingered, I would get into obviously doing your bulbs and getting your pots and your window pots in place.
Yeah, good. Okay, so my final thoughts on this then. Are you really ready for people listening and tuning in for some October gardening? We're almost mid-October thereabouts. Where we are now, with an autumn haircut, some shopping and planting, and a show of love for visiting wildlife. You might just find that winter into spring becomes one of your favourite times of year. It is for me personally. And if you're planning to sell in spring, as we talked about in the very beginning, you need to start thinking about it now, because if you're planning to sell in spring, then you're really going to be finally completing in autumn next year. If you're planning to sell like complete in spring, so you're needing to be finished in spring, you're going to have to be really seriously thinking about putting your house on now in order for that to happen. That's probably the best advice for people out there. I think a lot of sellers particularly don't realise that, the timeline that's involved in this and the amount of effort at work it goes in the background. a lot of people, because it's not a familiar transaction and it doesn't happen every year. They completely forget about how long it takes to do that and what is involved in doing and providing and going through that journey in the first place. And that's probably my best advice to this. So thanks very much for coming on the show, Richard. If there's any further questions for anyone, we've got a good insights and good comments there. If there's any further questions for anyone, please feel free to reach out to us. You can message us direct on these posts, or you can stick some in the comments. We'll pick it up later on. Until next time, guys, we'll see you. I'll see you tomorrow for the Sunday night update. You've got the Wealth Patient show on the Monday at 12:30 as well, midweek show as well, and then we're back on to a Letting show next week. Okay, bye-bye for now. Thanks for coming on, Richard.
See you later, Jim.